In this video, I'm going to show you how to self-host N8N to run it completely for free. I'll show you two different ways of doing it. The first one will be locally on your computer, and for that, I personally like to use Docker. Just go to docker.com. If you've never heard of Docker before, it's very popular in the software development world to kind of deploy stuff like N8N, operating systems, servers, and so on. So it gets pretty complex, I would say, and you can do a lot with it, but for our purposes, we're going to keep it very simple. All you have to do is download Docker for desktop based on your operating system. So right off the bat, you might feel a little overwhelmed with everything that's going on, and Docker's got a ton of stuff. It's very cool and it's very flexible, but the only two things you need to worry about is containers and images. Images is essentially a library of different operating systems, different files that we can pick and choose to actually run. So in our case, we're going to look for N8N, take all those files and run it on our computer. When it's actually being run, it is called a container, and it's its own little unit, almost like its own little operating system that's running for us. So in our case, let's go back to images, click on search images to run. Let's type in N8N and pick on this one here, N8N.io/N8N. It should have a ton of downloads, a ton of stars. Let's click on pull, which means we're pulling in all those files from N8N and putting it in our computer to actually run locally. Now that it's done installing, let's click on run over here, optional settings. Let's type in N8N, as a container name. Port, you can map it 1-to-1 here, 5678 to 5678. And volume, we won't worry about these environment variables. Let's click on run here. Let it do its thing. It's done installing, so let's copy this URL here, go to our browser, and when it's pasted, you're going to be greeted by a very familiar UI that you already know of, but keep in mind, this is running locally on our computer. So let's just go through the setup here. I can just put in a random email, temp, click on next. That's fine. You can put stuff in if you want here, and you can actually get the paid features completely for free if you have your license key. I've already done this, so I'm going to skip it for now. And there we go. If I go to start from scratch, you'll notice the exact same thing that is on the website, but now it's running locally on your computer in that Docker container. So if I add first step, right, very similar thing, trigger manually, AI agents, it's all going to be the exact same thing. So this is the way to do it locally, meaning on your computer. And I mean, you can run this, use this on your computer. As long as your computer stays on, this is going to be running and you'll be good. The second way is to do it on the cloud, but still using a free server. So for that, I like to use Render. Similar to Docker, there's a ton of features that Render actually has, but in our case, what we care about is the server, the web server specifically. Right now, if we're running it locally, that server is running on our computer. If we want to run it on the cloud, Render is kind of doing that for us. So just make a free account and go to the dashboard here, and you'll be greeted with this screen. For us to create a new server, let's click on Add New over here and click on Web Service, because it's going to be on the web ultimately. For source code, we're going to pull from an existing image. So notice Docker over here. Same thing that we did for that Docker container running locally on our computer. We're going to deploy it on Render. So I'm just going to give you guys the image URL, but if you want to find it, if you just type in Docker installation for N8N and you scroll down here, it'll be right here. Copy this URL, paste it here, and credentials, we don't need to worry about that. Let's click on connect. It should automatically find it, and I can just name it N8N. That's totally fine with me. For region, Oregon is fine. It doesn't really matter. And for instance type, this is the type of server that's going to be running in the back end. We're going to click on free. Keep in mind, for this free instance, it will spin down after periods of inactivity. So if you stop using it for some time, it'll basically just turn off and delete itself. And then when you access it again, it'll restart again. So there's ways to get around this. You can put in ping request every 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and so on, so it stays active. But what that means is that if you want something that's going to save your work in the long term, you might want to go in the starter plan. But if you just want to play with N8N and just see how it is, and maybe even go through some of the workarounds, there's plenty of YouTube videos online on how to keep this thing alive forever. Free plan is more than enough. Environment variables, leave that as it is. Right here, notice very similar settings to the Docker here. And let's look on deploy web service. Now it'll actually install that N8N image over here that's coming from N8N into this web server so that it can run when we go onto that URL. And we know it's done installing when we can see the local host here. So we can't go on local host because that's running locally on that server. We want to access it from our computer. So we're going to go to this URL over here. And you're going to notice after it's done loading, it's going to be a little slow. It is the free tier. We get the exact same screen that we did before, and now we can access this from any computer from anywhere. Hopefully you guys found this video useful. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more in-depth N8N tutorials just like this. And if you want to see how to scrape an unlimited amount of leads on Google Maps, to cold call, to give to other businesses, to even sell, watch this video up here. Bye.